So a couple days ago, Amabel sent me a message and let me know that there was a new John Theissen game coming out. And I assumed that she was just telling me this because she knows I like John Theissen's game. But in fact, there was a catch. She asked me if I wouldn't mind recording a little video about John Theissen's games because she knows that I'm a kind of a big fan. I'm busy. This wasn't something I necessarily wanted to do, but I never get a chance to just talk about games and like do the board game reviewer thing of like having a bunch of games and holding them up and talking about them. So that's what I'm going to do right now. And I thought I'm going to use this as an excuse to talk about not only why I like John Theissen's games, but why I think that they're interesting and important, and why, if you're interested in conflict simulation games, how you really kind of owe it to yourself to explore these things. So I love operational war games. That's kind of the scale I feel most comfortable with. It's about logistics and command control, fog of war. Instead of playing on a big map of the world or on a little tiny battlefield, you're in between. You're playing on a map of a state or part of a state, to kind of put it in U.S. centric terms. And I love this scale because to me, when I read Chandler on the campaigns of Napoleon, this is the scale of that narrative. And I find that it sort of connects me to the actual people who are making decisions on the ground. Now, there is a problem with this scale in modern wargaming. So, a long time ago, there were lots of operational games. Here's my first one. It's Africa Corps. This is one of the first war games I ever played. This came from my uncle many, many, many years ago. Um, and it's a great game, and it's at this scale, and you feel like Rommel when you're playing it. It's wonderful. Or Patton or Monty or any of those, and it does a really good job of kind of doing elementary supply. It's also not that complicated. This is a game I played as a kid. It has a short rule book, but the text is very small. And recently, I got very excited because GMT published a new North Africa game, North Africa 41 by Mark Simonich. This game's awesome. It's really cool, but it is like 10 times more complicated than Africa Core. Now, I'll say, to the credit of people who are really interested in this game, in this series, that complexity comes from a lot of learning. I mean, we have gotten better at making games and making more interesting models. And I also think that Mark's system is very clean, very streamlined. If you're an experienced player of the system, if that's your first operational game, or your first time playing one of Mark's World War II games, there's a bit of a learning curve. Once you get into it, it's very elegant. Um, but it's a steep hill to climb. And if you're interested in conflicts outside of the 20th century, that hill just gets steeper. So, two of my favorite game series is this is Kevin Zucker's series of operational games, Napoleon at Bay. One of my favorite this is the Days series is what this is called. This is one of my favorite operational games ever made, and it's hard, and it is not especially player friendly. You This is a game that kind of demands you study it and that you sit with it for a long time. It's very rewarding, but it's not something I'm going to give to a new player. And that's also true of something like this. This is Hood Strikes North, which is an introductory. It's designed as an introductory volume to the Great Campaigns of the American Civil War series, which I've only started playing for the past 6 months or so, and is really good. This is just a brilliant, brilliant design. But this series asks a lot of its players. I mean, you really have to, decide that you're going to study up. You need to find a partner that is also going to make that same commitment. And the games themselves take so long to play. And so, if you, like me, love these operational games and wish that there was some way that they were more accessible, then you have a friend in the work of John Theissen. Operational games have sort of stayed at the same complexity. I feel like in general they're pretty complicated. You get ones that are a little less complicated, a little more complicated, but so much of the innovation that's happened in making war games accessible over the past 10, 20 years has happened at the very low scale, something like Memoir 44, and at the very high scale, something like Risk or Axis and Allies. I know those are both old games, but you see a lot of some simple war games happening at both those high and very low scales. there's less good work happening in the middle, and John Theissen is sitting in that middle. So, for if you like Napoleonic games, check out his Campaign of Nations. You might have played, if you're kind of an old grognard, you might have played the Kevin Zucker game on this campaign on the Battle of Nations. That's a huge, massive game that will take months to play if you're playing with all the bells and whistles. This game is a 12-page rulebook, and it is exceptionally clean. Or if you want something even more compact and kind of svelte, I really recommend one of my favorites. This is Our God Was My Shield, Jackson's Valley campaign, which is the first volume of the American Civil War operational series that Hollinsfield puts out. This game's fabulous. It's really wonderful. And if you like Ancients, you can go play Anthony and Cleopatra, which is I don't have on hand, but is really lovely. And I got to the table this weekend. Now, one thing I really admire about this series isn't just the simplicity of the rules, although I do want to yet again say we are the series rules for the American Civil War operational series is 6 pages long. It's easy, and there are pictures. And like, is this a page? This doesn't count. It's very, very straightforward. It's really good at introducing folks to fundamental hex and counter rules. And I think that it gets away with with this simplicity by understanding some of the fundamental tools of conflict simulation modeling. So a lot of newer operational games that have been more accessible, things like David Thompson's really excellent General Orders, that is a very chewy kind of modern worker placement game. So it tries to make itself approachable by not using any of the traditional techniques that you see in a lot of other war games. John's work is not like that. John is somewhat of a traditionalist when it comes to their design approach. And I don't know John personally, but Mr. Theissen, I guess I should say. But I will say that this they understand the power of the traditional tools of wargaming. And here I'm talking about really dumb stuff like the power of a chart. Now, let's say, for instance, that you are about to attack your opponent through the woods. Well, in the operational series, you need to make a check on a table. And that's a very old-fashioned thing to do. Here, the table's right here. You make a little check on the woods table over here. And that attack might have been found out by your enemy. You might have trouble getting through the woods and deploying effectively because of all the bramble, and so that backfires. Or the woods might have given you cover and you took your opponent by surprise. Now, you could create like a clever Euro-inflected mechanism to generate this, or you could just put it on a table. In the same way, like when you attempt to concentrate your forces for a defense, if someone's getting ready to attack you, you roll on a little table. And maybe your guys arrive late, or maybe they get there on time, or maybe they can't make the movement at all. And that simple table opens up all these beautiful narrative and strategic possibilities. And it's fantastic. If you've never played a traditional hex and counter war game, I would just recommend pick up Our God Was My Shield, because it is a great demonstration of how powerful some of those sort of very old-fashioned design systems are. In addition to that, the maps are great. The cat and mouse maneuvering is fantastic, and it doesn't have the high resolution that you get out of something like the Great Campaigns of the American Civil War series, but you don't need it to get the broad thrust of things and to really feel like you are sitting in those meetings, like in the command tent, figuring out what to do. I'll mention too, these games are really fun as team games. I've had a couple opportunities to play them as staff games where we just kind of divide up the generals, and we institute all the usual classic operational games talking rules where you have to write little letters out and kind of pass them to your opponent, and they get them 2 turns later or something, depending on how far their armies are. There aren't rules for that in the game, but they just really they lend themselves to that kind of very open approach to modeling. So again, if you're interested in these things, you should check out some of John's games. They're fantastic. And I'm happy to make this video not even knowing anything about John Theissen's next game. Is it a Civil War game? Maybe. Is it another Napoleonic game? Fingers crossed. Could be another Ancients game. I have no idea. But I have played most of the games that John's designed, and I've enjoyed all of them. And so, if you've ever been interested in operational games, you owe it to yourself to give these a shot. All right, take care, happy playing, and Amabel, good luck on the new release.